So, Michael, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And we'd like to start off just by getting you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, you know, it's sometimes hard to say exactly what I do. I guess in my past, I've been an executive running companies, running the research and development part. I've worked as an Agile coach. Right now, I train and consult with leaders and managers to help them create the success they're hoping for through Agile, through digital, to create environments where people can actually show up to do their best and get the results, the high performance through that people are looking for.
How are you finding the landscape of companies at the moment that you're dealing with? Where are the trends? Which sort of companies are starting to appear on your horizon?
So what we see is like a mix. Like we think of the evolution of organizations moving from much more traditional ways of working, sort of business as usual, to much more progressive. Most of the organizations we see are actually, I'd say, at the very beginnings of that journey. They've tried to do stuff with digital or Agile or DevOps. They're just getting started on this journey and really struggling as they try to make a shift, because as they're just starting to discover, it's not just about installing a process. There's something bigger going on.
If you look at a lot of the things that are fashionable in the Agile space, like SAFe is very trendy at the moment. SAFe is very much a mechanical process. Do you think that going through that mechanical process, whether it's SAFe or less or whichever one it is a good starting point for companies?
Well, good depends.
For you or against you, basically?
Good depends on what the objective is. If you look at Agile is about doing certain things as well as being in a certain way of being, this Agile Mindset thingy. And I would say the market was demanding something that traditional organizations could consume in a fashion that didn't create a lot of disruption. So I see SAFe as an incredibly brilliant innovation to take the scary, innovative stuff out of Agile and boil it down to sort of the simplest thing that will fit in a modern organization without rocking the boat. Now, of course, what happens when you do this is that you take away the part of Agile that's actually giving the greatest value. So it is a very powerful starting place for organizations who want to get a very small increase in their overall productivity and performance. But in terms of them actually helping shift their ways of functioning into a more evolved, more progressive way of operating that allows them to survive in the 21st century, it doesn't help them. In fact, it actually hurts them because it's wasting their time and requiring a huge investment of time, energy, focus that's delaying them from actually getting started on changing their organizations to ones that can actually thrive in the future.
So what will it take for an organization to survive, to thrive in the future? If you're and let's talk the big ones, the ones that are really having the most challenges, like the pharmaceutical companies with 40,000 people, or the banks, with 40, 50,000 people, for them to thrive and, not just survive in the future. What's the journey that they need to go on?
I'd actually say the journey is the same for all organizations, whether it's 50 people, whether it's 40,000, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in IT, whether it's in banking, it doesn't matter. The secret for surviving in the 21st century, it's a volatile, complex, changing world, is that we need to be able to have everyone working to serve the purpose, serve the mission. We want people showing up, heart, mind, spirit, right? When we have fully, I know it's been talked about a long time, employee engagement, but when we actually have people who show up with fire in their belly, with passion, it's all over. It doesn't matter whether we're distributed, doesn't matter what industry we're in, it all will get resolved once we have people who are motivated and engaged. And that's the missing piece. I mean, it's all about the people. And progressive organizations understand it's about the people.
So holacracy talks a lot about the people as well. They talk about lots of small organic units. How do we take all these groups of people with fire in their belly who want to move things forward? How do you shape them when there's 20, 30,000 of them? Or, or you're a large, like you're building a dam, or you're building another sort of power plant, or designing a new plane, for example. How do we tie all those things together and get them going in the same direction and aligned in enough way that we can actually build a new plane or build a new power plant or whatever it happens to be?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think that's the question itself is the trap. You said, what if we have engaged workers? That's the challenge. Once we have people who are passionate, engaged, are able to adapt and learn and grow, they'll figure it out. What the specific structure is, whether it's holacracy or some other structure, some other way of organizing, that will serve the unique situation of those people and that organization's purpose. If we look at the book, Reinventing Organizations, there is no resemblance of one teal or high-performance organization to another in terms of internally how they structure themselves. They've all followed pretty much different routes. Why? Because each organizational situation is unique. Each customer situation is unique. I mean, there's some patterns that can be pulled out, but the most important thing is that organizations evolve and find out what works for them. They run experiments. They iteratively and incrementally discover the path. Now, that's how to find the right structure for any organization. But that isn't possible until we meet that precondition, that we've actually fully engaged the people. So the question is, well, how and that's really the magic question of how do we actually do that and get people not just engaged, but showing up with a growth mindset, showing up as theory-white workers, whatever we want to call this.
So we're sort of saying that if you get those people to that place where they're fully engaged, when they're with the fire in the belly, which is a great term, and want to move things forward, we need to trust them to find the organizing structure that solves the problem to achieve the mission. Is that what we're saying? Or
well, I'd say trust. Trust is an overused word, right? Because it implies that, we need to trust people. If we just trusted our people, well, actually, no. We actually just want to be really honest about our level of competency and everyone else's level of competency. Say, is it a good idea to trust, let these people make this decision? Are they likely to get a good outcome?
Yes.
Right? And if the people are not likely to get a good outcome making a decision, we shouldn't give away that decision. We should actually keep that decision. So I think trust is sometimes used to get to higher levels of autonomy. It's not about trust. It's about looking intelligently at the capabilities of people, about their ability to make a decision, about their level of responsibility, about their ability to work with the other people to make a system, like a decision that will work and actually be robust. Then we let a group or a person make a decision, right? If we're holding power. So I think that's part of the work. That's what you keep on coming back. If we have those people, the work is getting people into that state. The work is about developing people so that they can act like fully responsible adults and cooperate and co-create with other adults in a way where they're comfortable allowing the future to unfold in this emergence or uncertain environment.
Because one of the concerns that I hear from managers a lot is that they're not sure that the teams are able to make these sorts of decisions.
Yeah.
And so that's a fair concern. If I listen to what you're saying, that's a reasonable concern.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of push for autonomous self-organizing teams in Agile, and that's actually not part of the Agile Manifesto.
No,
it's actually not part of it. And the truth is, if you have 7 teams, depending on your organizational health, you have 7 teams, maybe 1-2 teams actually would benefit from a high level of autonomy. A couple more teams would benefit from a moderate level of autonomy. And then some teams really just need some really serious look at what's happening there and some important course corrections for what's happening on those teams.
one of the things that I find when I'm working with teams, especially recently, I like to try and create as empowered teams as possible. And one of the challenges that I find is that a lot of the people don't understand what real autonomy is or what empowerment is like. Do you think there's a gap, or how do we close the gap in our training or our education system to ensure that everybody learns about what it takes to work in an empowered team and an empowered organization? What do we need to do differently? Engineers, they learn how to write great code, but they don't normally learn how to work together.
Let's just look. What does it take for people to, let's say, function much more on an autonomous team, right? I mean, in a self-organizing team or self-managing team. Well, if we look at it from that perspective, someone needs to take responsibility for their behavior, for their actions, for their choices, right? We could call this acting like an adult. Yes?
Yep.
If you look at the number of people in our society that are actually acting like adults, and we say, well, hey, when was the last time you were in an environment where everyone acted fully like an adult and took full responsibility for their behavior and actions and choices and were open to feedback and learning and growth? When was the last time you were in an environment when all the people operated that way? You'll be like, I don't know if I've ever been in that environment in my entire life. Exactly. How can we, like, there's some very significant rehabilitation needed for human beings on this planet to operate in these autonomous states.
So we need to go out there and deliberately help these people learn to operate in that sort of an environment. Whether it's workshops or training and knowledge transfer. Because one of the things that I've noticed is that people don't. I don't have a problem with people challenging constraints, but often people actually don't try to find out what the constraints they need to operate in are anyway. So we'll empower a team, and then they'll start making decisions that are basically just not executable within the environment that they're in, because I think we have autonomy, we can do what we want. Well, sorry, we still have gravity whether you've got autonomy or not.
Right.
And how do we help people understand that to seek those things out and learn about?
Well, so quite honestly, I think that's the fault of the Agile industry and Agile coaches.
Yes.
So I think people who are setting up, I'll just be very, can be a bit controversial. I'll be very, very clear. People who are setting up autonomous self-organizing teams right now are negligent and irresponsible and harming organizations. Because I've asked this around the world. I've said, please raise your hand if you have autonomous teams. Most of the room raises their hands. They keep your hand raised. Keep your hand raised if those teams are actually truly autonomous and can make all the decisions without involving anyone else in the organization. Everyone has taken down their hand all over the world. So it's not true that teams can be autonomous. Telling them and using that word autonomous is extremely damaging. Like what we know, and a lot of better Agile coaches do, well, say autonomous up to a certain point, and working with the leadership around them to say, well, these are the decisions a team can make, and these are the ones they're not allowed to make a very clear sandbox of autonomy, right? And when that happens, that gives the team a lot of clarity of what they can choose and do, and where they're allowed to experiment and learn and grow and make decisions, and where they're not. But just using the word autonomous without that detailed, refined clarification and agreement, it's just creating a lot of damage.
Do you think it's possible for, in a larger organization, for any team to be truly autonomous?
No, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. And even attempting to make teams autonomous is actually damaging the organization itself. One of the key, this is just a very basic teaching from Lean. Let's say we have 7 teams. If you tell each team, optimize locally, optimize locally, optimize locally, and they all optimize locally, the global optimum, what's actually best for the whole company, gets worse. Right? Optimizing locally is not a strategy that leads to global optimum. What leads to global optimum is all the teams working with each other to improve the overall goal and success of the organization, which is the opposite of autonomous. It's actually interdependent. So the whole notion of creating self-organizing autonomous teams is extremely damaging for organizations, right?
Yes. So
Which is, again, most people
Yeah.
go like, oh, that's the staple of Agile. And it's like, well, I mean, it's a beautiful star on the horizon. It's a beautiful star on the horizon. Oh, wouldn't it be great if it's in the future we had teams with higher levels of autonomy and we're much more able to be self-organizing. Yeah, that's a great thing to have as a star on the horizon, higher levels of autonomy. But saying that that's what we're working towards,
but I agree.
or sorry, actually saying that's what we're starting with, ooh, that's really dangerous. And the proof is out. Like Agile is failing miserably, and this is part of the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. It's a question of levels of autonomy that you can. Often I find it's levels of autonomy that a team can work within. So it depends on where they are from an understanding of what autonomy will be for them and what the autonomy that they need, and also understanding the level of autonomy that is appropriate for the flock of teams or group of teams that they're working in. When teams like 7 teams, if we've got 7 teams working together and say it's on a single product because it's a reasonably large size product, what's the role of the Agile coach in terms of helping them see across that wider horizon that you were mentioning? We've got to see more than just what I need to do better myself or my individual team. How do coaches help those teams develop their own framework? SAFe provides a framework for all these things to work, but I don't think we should assume that you require an external construct to do it. Is it possible that an Agile coach can help those teams find their own structure? And what's the approach that an Agile coach should take to do that?
So that's a very good question. So for me, when I'm thinking about that, even if you have 7 teams that are working on different products that are unrelated in theory, there's always interdependencies, right? There's always places where there's common code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's 2 really, I'd say, very different perspectives that I've seen in practice comes from. One is from a product perspective, where people are saying from the end user perspective, where are their linkages, where are things lining up, where is there a touch point in user experience where we actually want to make sure these things line up, right? And because if you have 7 different aspects of a product, even if they're kind of loosely coupled, it's often the same user using all those things. And then backing it up is like, well, why are we treating these as separate product lines? And so there's a product customer perspective. That's one, which is kind of coming more from the, I'd say the product definition user experience perspective. The other perspective, which would lead to one set of approaching it, one set of solutions and so on. The other one is coming at from a technical delivery perspective. Like, okay, well, we have code bases. We have version control, we've got deployments, we've got product lifecycle. Like from that perspective, where are the places where the teams need to work together, even having parts of a shared code base, or having agreements and ways of working with code components that are needed to deliver a feature, let's say in one product and so on. So I think those are the 2 different ways. And again, every situation is unique, and there are patterns we can look at, but it's about helping each product group, each delivery group find what works for them and what they need in their situation. And this business of a one size fits all, boom, hey, we've got the pattern here. Like, well, no, like it
doesn't work anywhere else, so why would it work there?
Well, it's not about it doesn't work anywhere else. It's just from speaking about it this way, it's clear that we can't just have one solution, right? We're going to need to understand and create what's required for us to function and work interactively, and just from these 2 different perspectives.
So does that mean, because if we take that path, if a coach is taking that path, then you're orientating your teams, in this case 7 teams, around the customer, so the customer experience, and we can actually bring those teams together to agree all of those things that they need to agree on. And they can probably hypothesize that they can probably work out the things they need to agree on their own. So you actually don't need an external framework to come and say, this is what you must agree. Maybe what we need is a model that enables them to identify for themselves what to agree, and a model that facilitates them coming to an agreement,
Yeah,
whatever
so
that
like,
happens to be.
I don't know, for me,
Does that make
this is
sense?
just like basic common sense. Like it just falls out of
That rare and special thing.
human adults working together, figuring out how do they serve their purpose. Whether we talk about it from, let's say, the S3 or sociocracy perspective, well, where are the tensions in the system, right? Where are the tensions in the system and working through tensions? In an agile perspective, every team has a retrospective of like, well, hey, what's going on in our team? And any challenges between teams will show up in individual teams. So then anybody can say, hey guys, we have a challenge on this. Let's get together and figure it out. It doesn't need to be some, like, this is not rocket science. It's like, hey, let's talk. Like, this is what Agile is about, collaboration. Hey, let's talk to each other and figure it out.
Yes.
Let's learn about ourselves. Let's learn about how to evolve our process. Let's learn about how to evolve our ways of functioning so we can operate better.
So I want to take a little bit of a different direction now and look into the future a little bit. There's a lot of conversations going on now about I have sensitivity to some of these terms, but like business agility or enterprise agility. And if you look at an organization, let's say in banking, the average banking operational spend is 7.5% of the total budget is spent on IT on average in the finance environment. So let's say it's 15%, because let's say we're a super IT orientated bank. If we want to achieve organizational agility, how are we going to approach the other 85 who don't do software?
Yeah, so let me just make a comment, is that people, even with the sort of, I mean, really, people have seen pockets of success with Agile, right? Where they've gotten little groups of people who are working in a different way and have been extremely productive, very, very successful, right? And then the challenge is, how do we replicate this across IT? And now we're getting into this, well, how do we replicate this across outside of IT? That's what's being asked of, Agile, digital transformation programs, and so on. So from my perspective, the Agile Manifesto points to a very different way of working. Ultimately, it talks about how do we learn together, how do we focus more on people than on the process and the roles and so on, and how do we evolve and adapt in a changing world and orient ourselves that way, respond to change over following a plan, if you want to. Yeah. And really, I think that is the part that allows the evolution, the integration of Agile into the business. Because what is it? Because will it work in any business group to say, hey, wouldn't it be good if we focus more on people and how they're doing rather than process? Okay, yeah, we can do that. Wouldn't it be good if people learn and grow about themselves and how to work together to be more effective? Yeah, we can do that. Wouldn't it be good if we have people orient so they get comfortable with uncertainty and change, and we just integrate that into our business processes? Yeah, we can do that. They can do Agile. Like there's no barrier, whether we call it business agility, enterprise agility, whatever. I think the trap is that Agile, the mindset of Agile has the fruit that will add value, but people are getting distracted by the structures, the process, the Scrum, the SAFe, all of that, which is not the way to go. I mean, there might be elements from that are applicable, but that's not the starting place. The starting place is about helping people start to see things in a different way. And when they start to see things in a different way, whether it's an IT team or a business team, they'll see what can be used from that.
So we're talking, if we're going after that other 85%, we're talking much more of a cultural and mindset change rather than the mechanical change of Scrum or Kanban or SAFe or less or blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. This is why I spent the last 10 years in the world of culture and leadership, of how do we actually create so it turns out the question of how do we create an environment where Agile can actually fully bloom, fully blossom, where people don't introduce Agile but face massive resistance from culture, from the structures and so on. I was looking at how do we create an environment to create where Agile can actually just thrive, or digital or DevOps or whatever. And it turns out that same question is actually the same question of how do we reach business agility, right? Which comes back to what we were speaking about earlier in this conversation, which is, it's all about the people. When we have people who see the world differently who are comfortable with themselves, comfortable with uncertainty, comfortable with their own learning and growth, we're off to the races.
Yes, getting large numbers of those is going to be quite a challenge.
Well, no, it's not a challenge. That is the game.
That's
If
the
we talk
only game.
about, it's the only game. If we talk
Yeah.
about culture, culture is a reflection of all the people in the organization, their behaviors, right? If we add up, I'm a mathematician and scientist, so we take the integral, of all the different people and all their behaviors every day, that is the culture.
Yeah, the culture is, I don't know, somebody important said it, culture is how we do things here. And often when I'm interacting in classes, we're talking about culture and people are going, oh, we can't do that here. I like to remind them that culture is what we do here. That means it's what you define as what you do. So if you want to behave in a particular way, you can. If you don't, you don't. And that people need to take more ownership for how they behave and how they respond to stimulus.
Why do they need to?
Because if they want a culture, which is like the one you're talking about, where people are more open and transparent and able to be as honest about what they do well as they do not well, they are the people to create it. There's no magical, flying unicorn who's going to fly over and sprinkle pixie dust and all of a sudden, bang, it changes. It's a decision, right? I have to make that decision. You have to make that decision.
Yeah, if we want to be
you
part
guys
of the
behind
change.
the cameras, you guys have to make the decisions all for yourselves.
Yeah.
And often people don't realize that they can make that decision and make the difference. I want to go back to something you said earlier. We were talking about, people. We know that processes make things more reliable and more predictable. However, we also know that processes that are imposed have challenges in that area. If you're in a large organization where maybe you've got 1 million clients with credit cards, you need consistency in your processes across your 12 regions. How do you work out what level of consistency is good and what level of consistency is not good, or you just try to get them to do it themselves?
So let's come back. We need consistency where?
Customers expect a certain consistency in the service that they receive
So
from
people
a provider.
expect a high quality of service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So wait, they expect a high quality service, they expect consistency. What do they expect?
a high quality service, and they pretty often expect
often
consistency.
there's consistent. It's, you have services that are up and reliable, and it works the same way. Okay, yes. Okay.
Yeah. If I ring up
So that's not our processes, right? That's our systems. Let's just be clear, not our processes.
Yeah.
Our systems are highly reliable, stable, repetitive, all these things. Yes, our automated systems behave that way.
or even the non-automated ones, the human ones as well.
Wait,
so
wait,
if I call a credit
wait,
card company,
hold on.
yeah,
Let's slow down.
yeah,
Let's go slowly through this question. Okay, you have a human being that's doing what?
so I'm ringing up and I'm asking for an extension to my credit limit on my Amex, for example, and we expect that whether I go to the call center in Atlanta or I go to the call center in Birmingham, that the response will be similar. Not the person behaving and saying the
But
same.
wait, I thought our criteria was about customer outcomes, not about consistency.
Yes, but customers expect consistency.
No, someone calling up wants to know whether
Yes.
somebody calling up wants to be treated well.
Oh, yes.
That's actually probably the no. This is really important. Somebody somewhere defined consistency as a success metric. It's actually not. We learned this from Zappos. It's an incredibly powerful case study. Is that when you have people answering the phone that care about the customers versus following a script, it leads to extraordinary customer experiences. So I would argue that I think we have definitive proof that consistency in call centers is not a high priority goal, that having people treated like human beings is actually the most important thing.
Yes. I'm not talking about following a script. I agree with you on a script because it needs to be a human-to-human interaction. But for an organization to be able to be reliable and predictable and follow sort of
Who wants the organization to be reliable? No.
regulators.
Oh, regulators.
Regulators want a reliable, predictable response for the community because they're protecting the community. So
You're saying the regulators don't want the people who call on the phone to be cared for and treated like human beings? That's not their most important concern. Well, maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't.
Unfortunately,
Maybe,
no. Because they're looking at the whole of society and saying we need to make sure society is appropriately protected from bad actors which exist in the world.
Sure.
Right?
So we want to make sure
and they'll always exist.
We want to make sure the bank is treating their customers well.
Yes, and consistent in how they do it.
So that's a requirement. Is that a regulatory requirement?
The regulators look to your decision-making processes. How do you make decisions? They expect you to have the same decision on Monday, no matter what the social interaction between you and the client is, the same decision on my credit card extension on Monday to Atlanta as I would get on the Friday to Birmingham.
Yeah, but that's the same decision based on the information. So I can tell you a story of two different call center representatives. One who uncovers some very important information about the person's situation and makes a decision on that basis. One who is a different human being. Like just be clear, there's variable in human beings and pulls out different information that leads to a different outcome. Is that right? Is that wrong? No, because the decision-making process is very clear. With this set of criteria, make this decision. With this criteria, make this decision. And it's just through the human interaction process that there were different outcomes.
And that's exactly my point. How do we, if we're trying to give people a lot of freedom in decision-making.
But how can we guarantee the customer responds the same way? It's a different human, just bear with me. Let's say we're doing everything we can in the company.
Yeah.
Call center representative A asks the question one way.
Yeah. Gets one set of answers.
And the other set, this very similar question is just that the way the person responded, that the tone of their voice, which they can't change. One's got a British accent, one's got a Southern US accent, okay? Customer responds differently. You're saying the regulator expects us to control that variability? Like this is,
if they give the same answers to to Atlanta,
we can't control the customer. It's outside of the scope of our control. How are we supposed to control the variability? I mean, we're going to minute detail here, but regulators expect companies to treat society and people well. That's ultimately what the regulations are about. And what's gone on, and I see this in most organizations, is we take some regulatory requirement over here and we go translate.
Oh, yes.
Translate.
Yeah.
And then, you know how much space there is for a human being to think? None.
Yeah.
We crush the humanity of people, and then they're disengaged, and then we say, well, how do we get these people back engaged? And how do we get fire in their belly? Because what we've allowed these regulations to become mechanized. And we know this from Agile.
Oh, yeah.
That when we go back and we actually talk to the regulators, talk to the auditors, what they're trying to accomplish, we can do things like saying, well, we don't have a detailed requirements document which is this thick, but we do have all these automated tests which will prove the software meets the customer's needs. They go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Of course we can take that. It takes conversations, it takes time, but a lot of what I see with regulatory, and I might not cover all regulatory because I don't know all the regulation in the world, but most of what I see in regulatory is self-inflicted, business as usual, process-oriented thinking from the company itself.
Yes, my experience is exactly the same.
Yeah, so that's why we say we have to change the whole system. Well, how do we change the whole system? Well, we have to change the thinking of the people. The system cannot change until the people involved in regulatory change, right? So that it's oriented towards people, right? It's oriented towards learning and growth. So it's oriented to responding to uncertainty and change.
So when the regulators are looking for consistency, they're saying, if you've got the same information, no matter which call center you go to, you should have the same outcome. How do we, if we're going to empower these, like Zappos does, like they don't have the same regulatory environment as a bank or a pharmaceutical company, all of those ones. And I completely agree with you because my experience is if you go into a company and you look at a standard that somebody's supposed to follow, and then you say, show me the regulation, they can't tell you. Yeah. I would say 99 times out of 100 when I ask that question, they will say, it's regulatory. And I go, which regulation? I don't know.
Yeah.
Then how do you know it's regulatory? So we do definitely need to do something about that for sure, because we are disempowering people by doing that.
Yeah.
But
So I think this is missing the whole thing is when we come back and we want to create high performance, it means bringing that human element, which means there's variability, right? And again, we create boundaries around this by saying, oh well, someone is able to make a decision up to this much dollar amount, right? And then it's above their pay grade. And then somebody who's better at making decisions for complex situations, they can do it up to another certain amount, right? Beyond that, it has to, it's not whatever,
the
right?
CFO or
And
somebody.
so it's about really letting people make decisions up to their level of capability and competence, and where the level of exposure and risk, which is really what the regulatory is trying to accomplish, is reduced to what the human element can tolerate.
So
right? And actually, that it comes back to if it really is a standard machine thing, then why do we even have human beings doing it anyway?
oh yeah, exactly.
And it just makes people machine parts, and then they're disengaged and motivated, and then
No motivation
then we have all the challenges that go with that.
So rather than trying to get consistency across our Atlanta and our Birmingham organizations, we should actually focus on ensuring that the people in those locations who are dealing with certain levels of requests actually have the skills and capabilities to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
So rather than trying to drive consistency through process, we enable consistency through education and understanding and
And we
knowledge.
infuriate customers. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I'm talking to somebody who has no ability to resolve my situation my situation. Yeah, right?
All the time, yeah.
Is that good customer service? Does that lead to a good outcome for anyone? No. No, it's like if someone says, oh, you're seeking an increase of $10,000 in your credit card, that's above my limit to approve. Or actually, let me look at your scans, your scores. Actually, with what we have now on your file, we can approve that right now. That's actually based on what yours says here. Actually, based on what it says here, I can't do that. So you know what? I'll give you a choice. Either I can't help you any further myself. It's above my level. Would you like me to have a call back from someone the next? They should be able to get back to you in the next 30 minutes. Can they call you on this number? Boom, done.
Yeah. Then you don't have to try and force these global processes and global
my goodness, can
horrible
you imagine?
scripts.
Well, think about how much happier the customers will be. Think about how much better the brand of the company will be.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not, it's just so mind-boggling. We're just talking about how do we create environments where we have engaged, motivated people who are allowed to use their brain up to whatever level and capacity makes sense for them, to interact with people as human beings. It's a win for everyone. It's a win for the customers, win for the employee, it's a win for the company. But this is so different from the mechanistic thinking that we have of, where does it come from? Taylorism. Each worker is a dumb brute, right?
Yes.
And managers have brains, and that's where it comes from. And it's pervasive in all the thinking. And even this whole questioning line of consistency, how do we get consistency, is taking us back to the industrial manufacturing paradigm. Because if you look from a craft paradigm of everyone's a craftsman, no one would ask these questions. Because you know what? When this lamp looks a bit different from that lamp, it's actually beautiful and unique, and we can charge more money.
Yes. That's exactly what happens. There's a thumbprint in that one. That's an extra $100. Quite literally. So we need to move it. So if we engage with our people more and we educate them more and we allow them to grow, we can use that mechanism as a way of ensuring that we achieve the outcomes that we want as an organization.
Yeah, that's what Agile says. It's about people over process.
Yes.
The process is just there to support the people. Right?
And so
and I'd say it's more than just educating and supporting people. It's a lot more than that. In our families we've grown up in our education system and society, we've been deeply conditioned to show up as unengaged, unmotivated, irritated, frustrated, annoyed during our workday. That's the truth of it. Some of us are less so, some of us are more so. But I've asked this of managers and executives. I say, well, just take a moment to think. How much of your workday or your work week have you been angry, frustrated, irritated, annoyed, afraid, anxious, waking up at night, feeling job stress? This is an epidemic.
Yes.
And this is what's blocking us from showing up as engaged, productive, focused. Like there's a reconditioning, a rehabilitation. If you think about us in terms of our psychological health, it's like we've been sitting on the couch eating potato chips and drinking beer for most of our lives. So we want to start with some very gentle, oh, did you notice that you're sitting down? Why don't we try standing up? Hold on to something. Like there's some
Walk
very...
to the fridge yourself, get your beer. Don't get someone to bring it to you.
No. Let's get rid of the beer and the chips and have like green drink and like, and nutritious things to start eating.
Yeah.
So there'll still be food and beverages, but it's going to be start being, so like there's a very significant rehabilitation needed to create and get people back in the game. It's not enough to say, oh, we need people who are showing up motivated. This is where the focus needs to happen, is to focus on redeveloping, rehabilitating people, starting honestly with management, because they've been conditioned, along with everyone else. They've gone to the same school systems. They've had,
So if we're going to recondition all of these organizations, all of the organizations, and that,
No. Just the ones that want to survive.
Just the ones that want to survive. Okay, let's hope all of them want to survive.
No. Actually,
Some of them should not survive.
I mean, there are modern shows that have the documentary. The modern organization is a psychopath, right? If you did a personality profile, A lot of them are very self-destructive behaviors that are vastly unintelligent. So I would say only a subset of them want to survive.
Yes, there is a great deal of them that seem to be in a very deep and rigid state of denial about what the future looks like.
Yeah, and when you're in a state of denial, how open are you going to be to focusing on growth? Like very little.
Yes, and when I look at some of the ones that I'm familiar with, they seem to be in a state of, can I cut my costs faster than my customers leave me?
Which death spiral.
We've seen that dozens and dozens of times over the years. That's not a happy outcome. So let's say we've got a good number of organizations that do want to survive and do want to be happy. How do we help them? Because we can't handcraft one by one that journey for an organization. There aren't enough people out there with the skills today to be able to do that. This is one place where SAFE has had some success, is in the
building a system
a
that
systematic
anybody
way
can just go teach, right? Pretty much.
Well, there's part of it, but the building a system for the changing of an organization. And I'm not a huge fan of some elements of how SAFE does it, but in order to make change on the scale that we need to, aren't we going to have to find some way of making that change systematic? And
so like SAFE is a great example of process over people. Right. So if we want a process over people example, SAFE is wonderful. I'd say you can't really improve on SAFE in terms of putting process first to people second. It's beautiful for that.
Yes.
So we're talking about a fundamentally diametrically opposed approach, which is, what does a people first approach look like? What is a people-first approach? And they say, well, how can a people-first approach begin? Well, if we talk about the processes that of rehabilitating people from dysfunctional, traditional mindsets into progressive ones oriented towards learning and growth and uncertainty and so on, getting people to feel psychologically safe no matter what's going on around them. If that's the psychological process we're going through, we actually need people who've gone through that journey themselves and are now really comfortable operating what they call the Agile Mindset or growth mindset or theory Y or whatever it is. Once we have people who've rehabilitated themselves, then we can have those people rehabilitate people in organizations, in leadership. And here's the beauty of it. By working with leadership, once we rehabilitate the leadership, they'll be able to help everyone in the organization pull up, right? So that in some ways addresses some of the scaling challenge. It won't be as quickly on their own as it would be through people who are specialized in this rehabilitation process, but ultimately that's what it is. And that's what I see as the future of Agile, is really coming back to the essence of Agile, the Agile mindset, and really focusing on how do we develop within people the capability to operate in this new way. And that's what I do. That's my whole deal is focusing.
So how do we because say something a bit controversial.
Oh, that's so exciting! I love controversy.
Within reason, humans are completely programmable, right? Within reasons of morality and things like that.
Okay.
You can
Well, no, even
reprogram
without
people.
morality, and that's been
Well,
done.
well,
So, but
maybe it's true. You can go
I'm
outside.
not proposing that, but I'm saying it is possible, right?
Yes. So let's assume we do it in a moral way. People are completely programmable. So that means that we could develop systems which are able to create people of the right mindset in volume relatively quickly. So how do we create those systems?
Well, you're coming back to systems. So
Models or approaches or frameworks or whatever. There are certain techniques that will work on anyone to get them behaving particular ways.
Let me. So
or think and behave.
like if you look at what we're speaking of, it's really repatterning human behavior.
Yes.
Right. Shifting habits. We can call it that too. Yep. And if we look at that, I'd say, or actually the way we'd also phrase it is shifting consciousness. So we look at Frederick Laloux's book, it's about shifting to different stages of consciousness of human evolution. And some people are born with that, right? They're born and raised in a way where they can raised in a way. I mean, if everyone, let's take a very extreme example. Ricardo Semler, founder of Semco, this Brazilian company that's gone into
he's amazing.
incredible, right?
Yeah.
If you look at his like superhero origination story, right? He was treated as a miracle. He was treated as a miracle because the prior children before him were all stillborn. So when he was born, he was treated like a miracle who could do no wrong. Can you imagine what people would be like if from birth they were treated like miracles? They never did anything wrong. They were only told, yes, you can do it. Whatever you apply yourself, yes, you can do it. They have people who believe in them and no one tells them they can't. Do you know how unstoppable they'd be? It's insane how powerful like that are. That's what we're talking about when we talk about, so how
do we take the millions of managers we have across the world today?
Yes.
And they're going to be around for another 20 years,
yes.
right? So we need to get them into that mindset. So how do we move that?
So let's go straight to there. So if you look at traditional wisdom, it says we'll focus on people's strengths. And we have all these different systems of, I'm this kind of person, you're this kind of person. So for me to work with you, blah, blah, blah. That is weak sauce.
Yes, I completely agree with you on that.
We need to move beyond that. Because if it says, Michael's like this, and he has a hard time over here, he's got a hard time over here. Well, that means in terms of my dynamic range as a leader, I can't do A, B, C. It's like, well, for me to function as an effective leader, I actually need to do A, I need to do B, I need to do C, which means that we need to bring people into their areas of challenge and help them grow there. Right? And so what that means is we call them leadership edges. They're places where we don't show up as the leader we'd like to be.
And we need to do that on the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, so in terms of in the West of what technology is there, I haven't found that much. Okay. Honestly, where I found power is in the East, in Eastern wisdom traditions, right? And basically there's a very simple truth. Look at the truth of how you are and you'll grow. And we've got a leadership model based on this where by training ourselves to focus on our challenge areas, they start to shift. Not complex. So what does it take? It takes taking a group of managers or executives through a place where they see the connection. Oh yeah, the reason I'm having the challenges I'm having now in my organization is because of how I show up, and giving them a way to show up differently, to actually evolve through their challenge areas. That's it. And supporting them. And I think that's kind of like my current area that I'm running experiments with on my own learning and evolution journey, is that we know that training followed by consulting support, on the ground support, is much, much more effective in terms of stickiness. And we've had incredible experiences taking leaders through training experiences to shift their mindset give them radically different worldviews and views of themselves when they walk out. That part is a solved problem for us. Very, very profound, and grateful for the work we've been able to do there. But the challenge that I'm seeing right now is making that fully sticky in organizations. Because what happens is we elevate people to a different worldview and they go, yeah, I get it. But then they go back to their business as usual world, and there's so many things pulling them back. And so it takes so much strength of an individual and character to avoid getting sucked back. So what we want to do to increase the survival rate is really have a supportive environment, which means, coaches that are there to support them. And right now, the current challenge that I'm really and I haven't really fully cracked the nut on this, is helping leaders get that asking for help is a sign of strength. And by taking help, they're actually modeling to people that getting help is a good thing, and admitting, whereas executives, managers authorize, oh yeah, we're going to train our people in Agile, we're going to give them coaches. No problem. Yeah. You say, well, what about you? And they're going like, what about me?
Yeah, exactly.
Agile's about the people. We want to come in and fix them.
Make them agile. Please make them agile.
Exactly. So that I think is the
recipe for failure.
So that's really where our focus is about giving leaders that shift and then supporting them after they've had that shift to fully integrate that into their organizational environment context.
So let's run a little hypothetical here. I'm lucky. I've just been named the CEO of PepsiCo.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I've got 230,000 people in my company. I'm absolutely 100% committed to your vision for how the organization should be. I have 60,000 managers. How do I start my journey with my 60,000 managers?
Oh, that's really easy. Who wants to start? No. I'm really serious. Let's figure out exactly what's happening in your organization. We'll listen and see where the places, what's happening. As part of that, we'll find out who are the people who are, we can do lunch and learns with people, do a town hall style thing, share some information and see who's excited about it.
I've got 60,000 managers. Yes, I'll find you 10,000 they want to start now.
Yeah.
How are you going to start? How's that journey going to look like?
How's that journey?
I'll give you as much money as you want. How's that journey going to look like?
Yeah. So
it doesn't have to be perfect, but
so just to be clear, the limit is not the ability of the organization to spend money. The limit is the ability of really our team and its size and ability. Because the thing is, we can't just take someone off the street. I mean, this is the current business model, right?
Yeah.
So let's just take someone off the street, we'll find someone, we'll pull them in, and they'll be able to do this quality work. We're talking about evolving people's mindset and consciousness.
Yes.
So anyway, coming back to what do we do with the, there's a longer story there of how to get the people to do that.
Yeah.
But the shorter story is, well, we have limited capacity. Where are we going to have the biggest impact? Oh, we're going to have the biggest impact with the most senior leaders. So who out of that 10,000 are the most senior leadership that want to go through this program? And then do any of those happen in a coherent group? Because if we can just take one coherent group through that journey, that's going to be much more powerful than doing this leader here, this leader here, this leader here, this leader here. So what we do then is listen to the PepsiCo system and figure out, well, where is the cut line that will be the best place to do that first start. Get that group of leaders, take them through an experience, give them coaching support to integrate that and support it, and then continue taking them through cohort-like experience so they get the next level of renovation, the next support on coaching, so that they are able to evolve themselves to a place where they're operating differently, they're seeing the world differently. We say there's this very simple equation: treat people well and they perform better. That's ultimately what we're doing here.
So the good news is the success of our program in Pepsi has been so huge that I've now been hired by HSBC and I have 280,000 people. There's 100,000 managers. What do we do there? That's where I think the challenge for Agile going forward is. We don't see, with the leadership side of things, we seem to be stuck in the same place we were to an extent 10 years ago with Agile in general, or maybe a bit longer, that we seem to still be handcrafting everything in terms of relying on a small number of people like you who know how to make this journey happen. The problem is that you can't do 10,000 people at a time, and we need to do those sorts of problems.
So here's my plan for changing the world. It's a really safe. So why do I say change the world? Well, when we shift the consciousness or mindset of the leadership, and that percolates through the whole organization, everyone that organization is performing and functioning in a completely different way. They're going to be a much different corporate citizen. It's going to impact all the lives of the workers and the managers in those companies. It'll impact all the families of all those people. It'll impact all the societies that they're part of. It'll impact all the partners they work with. It'll impact the products they create and the people who use those products. So it's going to have a one company shifting has an incredible impact and footprint on this world, right? So that's our global vision for company by company changing the planet. The current strategy I have is that right now the only way that there's a very specific teaching we have to weave in and interconnect the dots so people get the need to change. Right now people don't really fully get it. And right now that's limited by, there's a bit of stuff in my blog, and the new book is not out yet. Really it's about, my goal is to get the book out, to create a community of people who want to do that around the world. That's kind of you call that the public path, and so on. The private path is, in order to serve this work, we need to develop people who can really profoundly hold people on this journey, either from a training perspective or coaching perspective. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with our current program. Like there's the Certified Agile Leadership 1, Certified Agile Leadership 2, the Scrum Alliance, and so on. So we actually did our first run of what we call the Academy of Leadership Mastery, or I call it Jedi School.
Okay.
Because it's helping people operate like Jedis, like really unlock their full human potential in themselves so they can unlock it in other human beings. That's essentially what we're to recover from all our leadership edges and challenges and so on. So that's our current approach, is to develop the people. Like you said, it's going to take an army, right?
Yeah.
Develop the
Big
people,
one.
both from a public perspective, people who are just doing their own thing and want to be trained to work in this way, as well as our own organization. And like for me, this has been my own internal challenge, because it's like, I really enjoy doing what I do, and running a company and having people has its own headaches and complexity and so on. So that was my own internal conflict. And the place I've gone to right now is that I'm super laser clear on my mission, and this is absolutely essential and needed in order to create the global impact that we're on our way towards. So that's why we've gone on to, and we ask people, it's interesting, we ask people at the end of this, the Academy of Leadership Mastery has 5 episodes. Episode 1 is 5 days on site, in depth, like people didn't leave, they were just in the process, and residential. So that's what I'm looking for. And at the end of it, I said, well, hey, if you could go back and assess yourself, how ready were you before you took this to really kind of do this work we're talking about? And they're going like, oh yeah, there's no way I was ready. And I go, well, how ready do you think you were? And they go, oh, I thought I was ready. Yeah, so the truth is we don't even know what we don't know. That's the kind of journey we're taking people on. And that's the kind of, and the thing is, we're helping people connect with the full truth of who they are, so that they have, I guess, the stillness, the capability. Because once we face our own darkness, we can help other people face their darkness. And when we face our darkness, we can come through it to show up as the leader that we want to.
So your new book, let's go down that direction. When is your new book coming? What's it called?
Where is the name?
And where do we sign up for Jedi School?
These are all good questions. There are multiple questions here. Okay, so Leadership 314 is the name of the book. You've heard of probably this thing called pi, 3.14, which is this timeless mathematical symbol. So we've dropped the decimal place, so it's just 314.
Okay.
We're talking about really what I see as timeless principles of organizational design, leadership, organizational change. So what we're doing is bringing people to what I'd call universal truths. Like this is just, hey, did you notice the universe just kind of works this way? That's kind of like how I like to think about it. It's really a guide of how to evolve oneself and one's organizational systems to the highest levels of performance possible. So it's for people who want a 20% increase, they already have SAFe, that's fine, they can just go use that. But this is for people who want an exponential increase. The model is fairly straightforward. It's lead yourself, lead others, and lead the organization. So when we focus by what we call putting the oxygen mask on ourselves first, and we focus on ourself as an emanator of the culture we want to create, then we help others on the journey, and then we help together co-create a system where that supports everyone on the journey. It's a very, very simple formula to describe and incredibly powerful in practice. The book itself is 3 parts. The first one takes the look from the perspective of organizational high performance and culture and so on. The second part is about leading oneself and really the journey one goes on in terms of the elements of personal evolution required, like increasing one's level of psychological safety, being very uncomfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity, having a strong...
Uncomfortable or comfortable?
Uncomfortable. Being very comfortable, yes.
Okay,
Yes. And starting to work away of dissolving the ego and confirmation bias and so on, so we can actually discover what reality is and so on. And the third part is where the rubber really hits the road. It's actually about very practical, specific ways of understanding the traps and the healthy patterns of organizational evolution. So it's a very practical book. It's 2/3 written in draft form. I'm working with an illustrator who's doing some extraordinary graphics right now, and my plan for this year, by the end of this year, is to finish the 3rd chapter of the book, and my to-do list is finding a publisher and so on and so on.
So it'll be ready by Christmas, is that what you're saying?
Well, we already have shared with people who are coming to our Academy of Leadership Mastery, Jedi School. They got a pre-release of the first 2 chapters. So it's really quite extraordinary. I'm very, very excited about that. So it may not be available in print until 2020.
Okay,
is probably my guess.
It's just being smart.
So that's the book. In terms of Academy of Leadership Mastery, again, we're just working out our 2020 scheduling. Our intention is to run one sometime in Q2 of 2020, another episode 1. So that's where that is. And anyone, if people on our mailing list, they'll get notified and so on. But you can just reach out to us. We'll tell you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure
Appreciate
speaking
it.
with you today.
Thank you.